Imagine if you couldn't save seeds from your harvest to replant next year. You'd think we're a lot more free than that in America, but maybe not as much as you think. In 2016, Arkansas farmer Mike Wallace was shot and killed in his driveway after a day at the court hearing the case that would ultimately end up being called State of Arkansas v. Bayer, Crop Science. Now this is a courtroom drama where farmers were going to testify about Monsanto and Bayer's monopolistic practices, but then they started to receive mysterious phone calls threatening them if they testified. And then Mike was murdered and a note left on his truck saying, "Don't talk to the government." This is the story of what happened to those farmers and how a company literally owns the seeds to your food. This is 1 Minute. We want to thank everyone who supported us in our move to a new studio. If you want to learn how you can help support us, you can find instructions below. In the early 2000s, the world needed a new herbicide because weeds had become resistant to the most common herbicides. So Monsanto set to work creating a new herbicide called glyphosate. Glyphosate shuts down an enzyme that all plants need called EPSPS, which makes it hard for them to make their own food. But don't worry, humans are safe, right? We just like to think we are. Glyphosate works by interrupting something called the shikimate pathway, which is a series of chemical reactions necessary for plants to build aromatic amino acids like tryptophan, tyrosine, and phenylalanine, all of which are considered essential amino acids. These amino acids are building blocks for all sorts of molecules that plants need to survive, like proteins, hormones, and even lignin, which gives plants their structure. Animals like us get these amino acids by eating plants or other animals that have eaten plants. So technically, yes, we are all dependent on that shikimate pathway working. But while we are dependent on the shikimate pathway, plants aren't the only organisms that use it. Microbes do too. But those microbes aren't just hanging out in the soil doing nothing. They actually help plants take up nutrients and fend off bad bacteria. So if glyphosate interrupts the shikimate pathway in the soil, then yeah, we know it kills weeds, but it might also kill the stuff that helps our crops grow. But we'll get back to that. As soon as glyphosate was patented in 1970, Monsanto began working on a way to make sure no one else could sell it. One of the ways they did this was to buy up all of the patents related to making glyphosate so that nobody else could manufacture it. And then they patented a special version of glyphosate that quickly degraded in water, calling it Roundup Ready. That way they could say they owned the patent on the technology and anyone else using it would be infringing on their patent. But that wasn't enough. The company began buying up the majority of farms in the US and forcing farmers into contracts, saying they wouldn't ever replant any of the seeds produced on their farm. The farmers didn't really have a choice, because Bayer, the parent company of Monsanto, had already bought up all the competition and controlled 80% of the seeds being planted in the US. Because of this, farmers were unable to save money by replanting some of the seeds they harvested, instead of always having to buy new seeds every year. But that's not all. The company didn't even want people saving seeds from their competitors. They wanted to control the entire seed market, so that they could threaten farmers for accidentally getting their seeds mixed up. In fact, in 2013, the company brought a farmer named Vernon Triplett to court, because he saved seeds from an accidentally contaminated field. Triplett won that case, but the company continues to sue farmers for accidentally contaminating their fields. For example, in 2017, a farmer named Jeremy Welch's sued the company when 10 pounds of soybeans that were supposed to be destroyed ended up on his property. He claimed he tried to destroy the beans by burying them, but the company said that just mixing them in with his own crop was enough to count as saving the seeds. They demanded $1.3 million in damages, which is why whole states like Arkansas had to intervene to protect farmers from being sued for saving contaminated seeds. This isn't exactly the behavior you expect from a friendly neighborhood seed company. What's scary is that the company has used everything from smear campaigns to lawsuits to murder to keep farmers from replanting their own seeds. This all comes down to one tiny little molecule. Glyphosate first became commercially available in 1978, and it took just 14 years to become the most widely used herbicide in the United States, killing hundreds of different kinds of weeds. The company loved it. It was cheap and easy to use, but critics argue that the company rushed to bring it to market before research could be done on its effects. Since then, the EPA has estimated that 1.3 billion pounds of glyphosate have been released into the environment, And here's where things get real weird. In 2015, the EPA acknowledged that there was evidence that glyphosate may be a carcinogen. But in 2016, the company paid over $400 million to settle 4,500 lawsuits without admitting guilt. Then, in 2018, the International Agency for Research on Cancer classified glyphosate as probably carcinogenic to humans. But still, the EPA says it's safe. In fact, the EPA's safety assessment is based on industry-funded studies that don't include testing for cancer. So, at the very least, scientists agree that we need to study it more, but also that it does seem to be killing everything, including the helpful microbes in the soil. In fact, in 2020, a multi-million-dollar lawsuit was filed against the company for knowingly lying about how much damage glyphosate was doing to the soil. Which again goes back to that initial question, doesn't it? We just like to think we are safe. So if you eat meat, you are definitely eating glyphosate. In fact, according to the Environmental Defense Fund, 85% of US beef and 70% of chicken contain glyphosate residues. Glyphosate residues have also been found in oats, milk and beer, even though none of these products were treated with glyphosate themselves. Also, glyphosate doesn't break down easily in the environment. In fact, it stays in soil and water for months. So it's possible that it's affecting more than just our food supply. In fact, there are thousands of cases of people being diagnosed with cancer in towns near where the company's factories are located. But the company says that's just a coincidence. There's also the issue of overuse leading to resistance. When weeds are exposed to small amounts of herbicide over time, they evolve to withstand larger and larger doses of herbicide, which means we'll eventually need to find a whole new way to grow food. Glyphosate has been around for over 50 years, and since then, insect populations have fallen by 40% worldwide. According to the company, this is totally unrelated to their product. But we know that insects are the foundation of the food chain, and they're redisappearing all over the world, at the same time that glyphosate is being used everywhere. Again, probably just a coincidence. One thing's for sure, when the company was sued by the state of Arkansas, their response was less than satisfying. Bayer said that when farmers complained about being sued by Bayer, they told the farmers to stop complaining and that they were on their own. So we hope you enjoyed this episode. We've made thousands of educational videos over the years, and we've been fortunate enough to win several awards for our work. But our mission is to make science and engineering accessible to everyone. That's why we're excited to announce that we partnered with Brilliant to offer our very first course. It's a fun, interactive introduction to the science of everyday things. You can think of it as a lighter introduction to the science behind all the amazing things we learn about here on C-Show.